Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to this Q&A session on EU exit matters that affect, obviously, the UK and more pertinently our local area. The first event was held last week over the Teams live session. That went without a technical hitch, so we're hopeful that this will run just as smoothly. Next slide, please, Andrew. Okay, so by means of introduction, my name is Neil Beacon. I'm Commercial Regulatory Manager covering environmental health and trading standards in North East Lincolnshire and port health in relation to Grimsby and Immingham ports. Dee Hitter is here as well, who is the Principal Officer for the port, and her is a lead role on imports, exports, ships and approved food establishments. On the screen at the moment are the best means of contacting our team, which is generally through our generic email addresses, which are routinely monitored, although we are considering changes to these contact methods in the future if the service demands dictate that we ought to do that. Okay. So just a quick overview of what we are intending to do on this session. It is a live session and a two-way information gathering process. We want to give you some practical information on how we are preparing locally to meet the anticipated demands in relation to EU exit. But we also need you to provide us with some details of your current activities, and that will help us to mould our regulatory services to the benefit of all concerned. Now, the focus for this session is primarily on exports and catch certificates for imports, because those are the changes which we anticipate will affect us from the 1st of January onwards. It is our intention to hold some future sessions that will look more at imports in greater detail. There are also certain details and queries which are yet to be finalised and clarified by the central competent authorities. Those of you who have asked questions of them may have already realised that some of that information is still outstanding, but we will provide you with what we know at the moment and obviously seek to update you as those matters do get clarified in the future. And it's also worth pointing out that our services cover regulatory controls to protect public, animal and environmental health in the Borough of North East Lincolnshire and at the points of entry and exit. But we do not cover issues in relation to customs controls. Some of our systems will link in with customs, but we are not experts in customs fields at all. So a quick overview of the running order for this session. I'm just going to give a quick summary of the UK officials, the agencies involved, what their responsibilities are, just for clarification, and also provide a summary of the UK's border operating model, which is going to be rolled out from the 1st of January onwards. Dee will then cover the preparations we are making locally and summarise the different schemes and options and elements involved with export health certification and including a mention of fees and charges associated with them. We're then going to cover some of the questions that have already been sent to us in advance, but we'll also at that point try to answer any that you post within the live feed. You should be able to see that there is a live question feed on this session. We will do our best to answer those, but any that we are unable to answer at this point, we will do our best to address as soon as we can. And then finally, we will mention a quick survey, which we would like you to respond to in order for us to be as informed as possible about your needs when tailoring our services. So a quick summary of the different official agencies involved within the UK that are pertinent to import and export matters. DEFRA take the lead role on animal and plant health matters, and that includes the import and exports of live animals, products of animal origin, and includes the Animal and Plant Health Agency, who, amongst other things, cover the approval and audit of the UK's border control posts. The Food Standards Agency take a lead role in maintaining food hygiene and food standards for the consumer in the UK, and they are the central competent authority for the delivery of official food and feed controls, largely in relation to inland environmental health and food safety services and food standards services. The Marine Management Organisation, again linked to DEFRA, they take a lead role in fishing regulations, including fishing fleet registration, fish quotas, but they are also the lead authority when dealing with the UK's implementation of the IUU regulations, the illegal, unregulated and registered fishing regulations, and that includes catch certificates, which are of importance when dealing with imports and exports. The local and port health authorities in the UK are responsible for maintaining food and feed law compliance in their respective areas and for delivering official controls on food and feed at the points of entry to the UK. We also have the responsibility for checking catch certificates and other IUU documentation for fish and fishery products arriving by any other means other than a fishing vessel, so by container, road, rail or air. And the MMO take the lead on imports of fish from fishing vessels to the UK. So we'll just move on now to the border operating model, the UK's border operating model. The second version of this was published on the 8th of October. It is available on the UK gov.uk website. A further amended version is anticipated to be published soon. As far as we understand, that will mainly cover some corrections and clarifications. There's no substantial changes planned in that border operating model. But essentially, it plots the course for the changing controls at the border from the 1st of January 2021 in terms of how certain commodities will be controlled when moving between the EU and the UK. So to give you a potted version of the border operating model and what the key dates are in relation to that, on the 1st of January, it is anticipated that all exports of animal products to the European Union, including fish, will require export health certification. And those certificates, particularly in relation to fish, can be signed by local authority certifying officers. We'll go into detail, a little bit more detail on exports in a moment. In terms of catch certificates for exports to the EU, the MMO are the point of reference here. They have created their own fish export service, which is an online system for creating catch certificates relating to catch from UK flagged vessels. Imports of fish and fishery products from the UK and non-EU states will need to follow the UK's retention of the illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing regulations. So that is going to be one of the main changes from the 1st of January in relation to imports. This means that most direct landings and fishery product consignments will need to be accompanied by catch certification and any other relevant IUU documentation, such as processing statements or storage documents, depending on the nature of the product and how it has been handled in the EU. And as I mentioned previously, port health authorities have the responsibility for checking catch certificate documentation for fishery products arriving by container, by road, rail, or air. The Marine Management Organisation, the MMO, are responsible for checking catch certificates for fish arriving on fishing vessels and some bulk fish arrivals. Moving on, the next key date next year is planned to be the 1st of April, where imports of EU products of animal origin must be accompanied by export health certification and pre-notification via the UK's import control system. IPAFs will be required at that stage. But also note that on the 1st of April, there will be no requirement for such products to enter the UK via ports and airports with border control posts. And there will be no additional sanitary or phytosanitary checks on EU goods or relevant EU goods until the 1st of July 2021. What has been asked of port health authorities at this stage, however, is that we will be carrying out some remote documentary checks or documentary screening on imported product of animal origin. And this will be, we haven't got full details of exactly how that is going to pan out or what the specifications for those checks are, but it's likely to be something where we compare information logged on IPAFs with electronic versions of the health certification, which should be accompanying those loads. The next date of importance is then the 1st of July. At this stage, all products of animal origin imports, including animal byproducts and of course including fishery products, will need to enter the UK only via ports with border control posts that are approved for the relevant product type approvals. So some of you may know that there is quite a bit of activity at the moment to amend existing and also create new border control posts in the UK to facilitate this change. But the idea is that they will be up and running by the 1st of July. It will be the Port Health Authority's responsibility to carry out all the required documentary, identity and physical checks on imported products of animal origin from all sources at that point. So that's whether it's EU origin or non-EU origin. So I'll hand you over now to Dee, who's going to give us a little bit more detail on our local preparations and some of the issues relating to export health certification.
Okay, thank you, Neil. So I'm just going to run you through some preparations that us as a local authority have been taking in relation to preparing our team to deal with the end of the transition period. As Neil pointed out, this is predominantly the first stage. Focuses on our resilience in terms of export health certification and the checks on catch certificates from the 1st of January. So just to give you a little bit of background, just in relation to how we have come up, I guess, with the figures that we have come up for in terms of the anticipated resource. You may recall probably a year or so ago now, the Food Standards Agency got in touch with you as businesses, as approved premises, to find out exactly what you are currently exporting to the EU or what you propose to export to the EU at the end of the transition period. We then contacted the Food Standards Agency and requested this information, made some follow-up contact with a lot of you just to kind of get a bit more information on volumes, what times of day, evenings, weekends, whenever you operate, just to try and prepare our service, I guess, as best as we possibly can. There is, in fact, a local or indeed national shortage of official vets, environmental health practitioners and food safety officers, all of which can issue export health certificates. And AFA, who's the competent authority when it comes to products of animal origin, have acknowledged this, and they permit the use of what they call certification support officers. So they are basically officers that can, as the name suggests, support us in the role that we carry out. So here at North East Lincolnshire, we have 9 certifying officers, environmental health practitioner, food safety officers that can sign and endorse export health certificates for fishery products within the team. But we've got a few additional officers that are actually completing the necessary training to be able to do this. So our first stage of recruitment, therefore, focused on certification support officers. And we've looked at getting an additional 10 within the team. Also, as part of this role, we've taken on a team leader and a training coordinator. Given the very tight timescales that we're looking at, we want somebody to be able to coordinate and deliver the relevant training that we believe these officers should undertake to give them the necessary understanding of what they need to do in terms of export health certificate work. So these support officers are the officers that will actually be visiting your premises and collecting the relevant information to allow us to issue those certificates. In terms of training, given the very tight timescales, we are working in collaboration with Seafish, who have agreed to deliver some training to these officers. This will focus on basic food hygiene training, but that is tailored with a bit more of a bespoke approach to fish and fishery products. So the nature of the product that they'll be seeing when they come to your premises. They will also do some training in the principles of fish quality. So they'll be looking for pathogens, spoilage, any type of issue that they can essentially raise with yourselves or us if they believe or have any cause for concern. These are both accredited and certified training courses. And in addition to this, they've got a compulsory training course that the Animal and Plant Health Agency have specified they need to do to carry out this role. In addition to this, we thought it might be useful for them to do a bit of training in relation to supply chains, transport and logistics, just to give them a basic understanding of the movement of goods, and then of course some workplace transport. Although we do acknowledge when they are visiting your premises, they will very much need to comply with the procedures and protocols that you have in place. Just moving on to systems then, you should have all received some direct correspondence from AFA about their new export health certificate online system. There will be a requirement for you to register on that to be able to apply for export health certificates. This is a system that is already up and running, and it is a system that we're already familiar with because we use it for our export health certificate work currently to non-EU countries. If you haven't heard anything from AFA, please let us know and get in touch with us, and we can point you in the relevant direction to be able to do this. So like yourselves, our officers will also receive training on this system, because along with the certifying officers, these are the officers that will be administering the system and pulling off the export health certificates, so they can come and compare that with the information that's actually going. So next then, just to give you a bit of an overview of export health certificates, for those of you that aren't currently familiar with them. So an export health certificate is basically a document that needs to accompany a consignment to attest essentially that it's fit for human consumption. Currently, an environmental health practitioner or a food competent certifying officer can certify these certificates for fishery products. An official veterinarian, or OV, as they're known, can issue export health certificates for other products of animal origin. So just in terms of the process, you as an exporter would use this new system to apply for an export health certificate. You provide all the relevant information pertaining to that particular load. The certificates will be then sent through to us using the same system, and AFA have assured us that this is a relatively swift process, and then it would be for us to complete. We would also ask you to notify us separately by email of the date and time of loading as far in advance as you possibly can. This allows us obviously to prepare and plan our workload around what's going that day. So in terms of on-site visit then, if we are required to make an on-site visit, the officers would be coming out. They would probably go into your dispatch area to oversee the load. They would be looking at the product labels, the dispatch note, anything that they can use to cross-reference the information that you've given on the certificate with what is actually going. If a seal number is applied to the container, we would also require this information so it can be noted on the export health certificate. All of this information that they had gathered would then be fed back to the certifying officer, who would oversee whatever information they've been given and sign and date the certificate. The guidance that has been circulated by AFA in relation to fishery products actually allows us to use a risk-based approach when it comes to physically visiting and inspecting consignments. This is the very same risk-based approach that we currently use for our official food controls. So that will essentially determine the frequency that we come out and inspect your premises. So if we are not carrying out a visit on a particular occasion, we would ask you to provide photocopies of the labels, a seal number, a dispatch note, any potential commercial documentation if you are exporting a product that you've purchased from elsewhere. And if you are exporting a product that's being imported from a non-EU country, we may also ask to see copies of CVEDs or CHEDs, as they will be at that moment in time, just showing clearance through a BCP. In relation to this, we would also need a signed declaration from someone that is authorised to act on behalf of the company, simply to declare that the information that they are providing to us is correct. At this point, I'd just like to really press the point that we cannot issue an export health certificate for a consignment that has already been dispatched from UK shores. So if you have forgot to apply for an export health certificate or forgot to tell us that an export is going, we can't issue one for one that's left our area. In that situation, we would advise you to do is to speak to a local authority where the product currently is to see if they can issue an export health certificate, followed by a supporting statement from us, or bring the load back to us so we can issue it. If you notice an error on a certificate once it's already left us, we can issue a cancel and replace, which cancels the original certificate and we replace it with one with the correct information. However, given that the chances are the certificate is going to accompany the load, obviously any changes made to it can actually cause delays and disruption. So we'll be looking to kind of avoid this wherever we can. Okay, thank you. So just in relation to export health certificates and the variety of schemes that AFA have generated, we have your general export health certificate, which is a direct export from your manufacturers or a cold store. And like I mentioned before, we can carry out a visit on a risk-based approach for this. There's also the groupage export facilitation scheme, which I know many of you are familiar with because we've received quite a lot of questions in relation to this. So this is essentially a scheme we believe has been set up focusing predominantly, I guess, on retailers. So it is one exporter that is collecting products from multiple manufacturers that have manufactured the goods for them. It will go to a particular location. An export health certificate or multiple export health certificates, depending on the product, will be issued, and then it will be exported to the point of destination. When you use this scheme, there is a requirement to provide a 30-day supporting attestation. So every 30 days, a supporting attestation currently issued by an OV would need to accompany this load and be sent to the certifying officer at the point of destination, who will use that in support of issuing the final export health certificate. Another scheme is a export logistic hub, and this is a hub where the operator of a hub would collect loads from around the UK, bring it back to consolidate that load on behalf of many different companies, and an overall export health certificate or multiple export health certificates, depending on the product, will be issued at that point. And again, that would then accompany the load. In this case, it's actually the local authority from which the product was manufactured would also have to provide us with supporting attestations, but for fishery products, similar to the risk-based scheme, these supporting attestations can be provided and be valid for up to a period of 6 months, again, depending on the product that is being exported. Just on the point of export logistics hubs, we are currently working with a local company that is wanting to create an export logistics hub here in Grimsby. So we're currently going down the process. So if you require any further information on that, that is something that I'm sure they or us would be happy to provide. Just pointing on probably a point that I know many of you will be interested in, and that is our charges for export health certificates. Like I've said, this is currently a service that our team offer for exports to non-EU countries, and a charge for an export health certificate is £108. This is based on the amount of time it takes to issue a certificate, and the charge is on a very much on a cost recovery basis. In terms of any supporting attestations that we're required to provide, Neil and I, both together and independently, sit on a variety of working groups when it comes to export health certificates and most other points of interest, I guess, from an EU transition perspective. And so the charges for supporting attestations is something that we're working with other local authorities and indeed the competent authorities to provide a charge that is as fair as possible. But as I've mentioned, if we're using a risk-based approach, you will not require a supporting attestation for every load. They will be offered required on a risk-based approach, and it could be one supporting attestation every 6 months, depending on the product that you're exporting. Okay, so we'll move on to some questions. So we can cover the questions that we've received in advance of these sessions. So we're happy to have a look at them and provide some answers. And then if any of you have sent some questions over that you want us to answer, we can do that as well. Okay. So, do you want me to start? Do you want to start?
Well, you pick up that first
I'll
one.
start then.
Yeah.
So the first question that we got was, will there be a charge for supporting attestations? I believe I've just covered that in terms of the presentation, but yes. We think there will be a charge for supporting attestations, but at this point in time, we don't know what it is going to be. But again, it will be as fair as we can possibly make it, and it is not required on every single load.
I think probably the additional point to make in relation to export health certification as a whole is that it isn't necessarily a statutory service for us to carry out. It is a discretionary function which many local authorities do to help support their local economy, and obviously for North East Lincolnshire this is an extremely important area of work, and one which we have carried out and provided a service provided for the industry for many years. So it is our full intention to continue with this. Obviously this presents us with a different challenge, and we just have to make sure that all costs in relation to providing that service are covered, and so there is likely to be a bit of a learning process for us as well, to actually work out and ascertain what the service demands are, and hence what the costs are for providing that service, and then we can make sure that the charges are set appropriately.
Yeah. Another question we've got is, do we need to be signed up to a GEFS to directly export? The answer to that question is no. If you want to directly export from your premises, you're well within your rights to do so, and an export health certification can be issued to cover the whole load or part of the load, depending what it is that you are exporting.
Okay. And also sort of connected to that, question number 3 that we're looking at on these lists, if we were signed up to GEFS, can we just ask for an EHC, an export health certificate, for products leaving our store instead of a supporting attestation? Well, again, yes, linked to that earlier answer for the previous question, the choice is yours. Is that if you are directly exporting from your premises, you can indeed get export health certification for that. Just because you are signed up to GEFS doesn't mean to say that you have to follow that scheme for all export work.
Okay. Would a certified officer have to inspect every load? Again, I believe we've covered this on the presentation. If you're exporting fishery products, and it might be worth me pointing out that now, no, we wouldn't have to come out and inspect every load. If you're using an official veterinarian because you're exporting other product of animal origin and you're not signed up to a GEFS scheme, then the chances are yes, they would have to come out and inspect every load.
Okay, so next question. Will the exporter apply for the export health certificate under the GEFS scheme? Well, it will be the operator of the distribution centre or the point of dispatch for that particular under the GEFS scheme that will be applying for the overall export health certificate to cover a load made up from multiple different sources. So that's essentially how that system is meant to work, and that is a similar situation for logistics hubs as well, where the product isn't necessarily owned by the person exporting the load, but the transportation or logistics company that put those loads together for further transport, if they're operating a logistics hub, will be applying for the overall export health certification to cover the load. But obviously documents will be required for each part of those loads coming from different sources, different establishments.
Yeah. The next one is, will there be any changes for non-EU exports? No, as we see it, non-EU exports will carry out as they are. So they will either be accompanied by an official export health certificate, which is an export health certificate when there is an arrangement in place between the UK authorities and the authorities in the country of destination. And those certificates are agreed and they will go as they currently do.
And the next one is around the trade agreement that may transpire between the UK and the EU. If there is a trade agreement, will import health or HMRC need to get involved in movements of goods? Well, it's a bit of a million-dollar question, that, in terms of exactly what the arrangements are going to be for any trade agreement between the parties, which will then dictate the controls which have to be applied. But there is an anticipation that whatever the trade agreement will be in place, it is likely to need controls for the import and export of goods to some degree, and it is to a certain extent, dependent on the trade agreement to what degree those controls will that will have to be applied. So that is something which is obviously a little bit up in the air as the negotiations continue, but we're obviously getting very quick to the point at which either we're going to go ahead without a trade agreement in place, or there will be a trade agreement, and the full details will be coming out pretty swiftly, I would imagine.
Okay, and the final question that we received was, how do we apply for an EHC and what documentation do you need to see? Again, I think we've covered this in the presentation, but I'll just summarize it very quickly. You apply directly using the Export Health Certificate online scheme. You will specify when you apply who the certifying officer is, so whether it will be the local authority or official veterinarian, and the certificate will be sent directly to them. If we are required to come and do a visit to the premises, we will oversee the load, look at what documentation or information you have available, so whether that be production records, dispatch notes, labelling, anything like that just can verify the information that you've provided is the same as what is on the is actually going. If you are exporting a consignment that is of non-EU origin that has been imported, we may also ask to see a copy of a completed CHED or CVED, as they currently are, just to show that it's been cleared and fit for human consumption, either at our BCP or a BCP elsewhere. Okay. Okay,
so those are all the questions that we've sort of covered in terms of the ones that have been sent in advance of the session. There are currently no questions from this live session posted. What we'll do now is just briefly mention a survey that we would ask for you to complete and return, which again will provide us with some important information about volumes and frequency and timings of departures of loads that you currently arrange and through your export business, and that will help us to tailor our services accordingly. I don't know whether there's anything else you want to raise on that, but it should be going out pretty soon after this session has been completed, with a reasonably tight turnaround time. So we seek your assistance in providing us with that information. If, again, as we've mentioned previously, if there are some specific questions that we haven't covered or adequately covered, or you want some more information about, then obviously please don't hesitate to contact us through our normal contact channels.
Yeah, likewise, if you want some further information or links to the government Export Health Certificate online service, please get in touch and we'll point you in the right direction. And in addition to the survey monkey or questionnaire, we will also circulate a list of questions that we've been asked and answered for your information.
Okay, so in the absence of any other questions being posted, we will bring this live session to an end. As I mentioned previously, it is our intention to carry out a further session also on focusing more on the import controls for bringing things in from the European Union. But if there are no further questions. I hope that has been informative to you and helpful to you. And I will bid you a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.